Hello.
Hello,
What is your name for the record?
my name is Avonelle Hawke
And what was your maiden name?
Johnson,
Okay. And where and when were you born?
Tucson, Arizona, at noontime on January 24th, 1924.
Which makes you almost 100 years old.
That's right.
Okay. So you were born in Tucson in 1924. At that time, Tucson was very much a Latino community, would you say?
Oh, very much.
Yeah. Um,
At least for me, because I lived on the south side.
right. But didn't you live in an area that was populated by a lot of railroad people, though? Were there lots of railroad people?
There were a lot of railroad people because the Southern Pacific had laid their tracks through here.
Right.
And my family were railroad people.
Right. So you were on South Park. My understanding is that's where a lot of the railroad people were, kind
Right.
of south of the tracks,
Right.
but not far from the tracks.
And close to the roundhouse.
Right. And you were close to the roundhouse there at South Park.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when you went to grade school, were there a lot of Anglos in your class?
Well, I started grade school on what was considered the east side, on Speedway, in the first grade, and then we moved. At the class I started in at University Heights on Maple and Park Avenue were all Anglo.
Oh, okay.
And then we moved, and they gave me a double promotion, which was stupid, but they did that in those days. And I started my second grade in Elizabeth Wharton on 22nd Street. It was on 22nd, and it was west of Park, a couple of blocks.
Right. So you started second grade there after your double promotion?
Yes.
So you basically went from kindergarten to second grade?
No, they didn't have kindergarten. I started first grade. I didn't go to kindergarten.
And you didn't go to first grade either?
I went to first grade.
Then you went to second grade. That's not a double promotion.
Well, when they double promoted you, they skipped you a semester.
Oh, a semester. Okay. But still then, had you finished your first grade?
Yes.
And you started at Elizabeth Wharton in second grade? How was that a promotion?
Well, see, I started school in January, not in September, because my birthday was January. And in those days, you had to be 6 years old to start school, first grade. And so I started in the middle of the year. So it promoted me so that I was starting each grade in September instead of January.
Okay. But Elizabeth Wharton, were you, was it mostly Anglo or Mexican kids?
It was mixture. We didn't have black students, but it was predominantly Hispanic, what they called Hispanic.
They called it Hispanic back then?
Not then, no.
It's Mexicans.
What we do now.
Yeah.
No, we called them Mexicans.
Right. They were Mexicans. Yeah. They weren't from other parts of the Spanish-speaking world primarily. They were from Mexico. Yeah.
They were Mexicans.
Or they were American citizens of Mexican heritage.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were a mix of Anglo and Mexican. A number of them were. Because there were a lot of mixed marriages in those early days.
In fact, your best friend was the daughter of a mixed marriage, right?
Oh, yeah.
Who was
My
she?
next door neighbor.
Yeah, that's your best friend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dorothy Aldrich.
Her mother was Mexican. Right? Yeah.
Louisa.
So were you a minority in your own class?
Yes. Yes.
And was the instruction in English?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The students, the Tucson school system had a law that they would not permit children to use their native language, Spanish, on the school ground or in the school.
So there was a real effort to assimilate these kids.
Yes.
Now, at that time, would you say that the parents of these kids supported that?
I would have no idea whether they did.
But you're not aware of any.
No, I don't know. I'm not aware of any friction.
Okay. Right. So as far as you know, the parents were probably supporting the assimilationist.
Well, and the kids spoke Spanish on the school ground.
Mm-hmm.
They were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got mad at me about something, they'd all speak Spanish, so I couldn't understand them.
Do you recall, other than Dorothy Aldrich, your next door neighbor who was half Mexican, half Anglo, did you have any other pretty good friends who were the same or all Mexican at the time?
Well, I was thinking back on what was friendship between girls in grade school when I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't visit each other's homes unless we were right next door or right in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
They all kept to their own neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never in Annie Hughes or Jessie Grace or Tensia or Lydia, any of their homes, and they were never in mine.
Mm-hmm.
But we played together and had fun at school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, recently I read a very interesting book called Los Tuxtlanenses. A Mexican person from Tucson is called they're called Tuxtlanenses, Mexicans from Tucson. That's how they refer to themselves. And it's a book about the Mexican community in Tucson from 1854 to 1941. So why don't you just show that to the camera? And well, I thought it'd be kind of fun because this is a period in which the later part of this period is a period in which you grew up in Tucson. From 24 to 41, that's 17 years, covering the last 17 years of this period. And the book talks about the Mexican families that really founded Tucson, the modern day Tucson, and helped develop it. And these are families that you interacted with growing up. You and Dad interacted with.
Oh, this looks like a wonderful book.
And I thought I'd use this book as just kind of a jumping off point to tell more stories about your growing up. With an angle of, these are Mexican families that you're interacting with and telling stories about. So one of the families listed in the book is the Aros family, which is an old Tucson family. Pre-1880 ranch family. The Aros family founded Sassabee.
Founded Sassabee?
Yeah, that is part of on their ranch, I guess. Teofilo founded it, and so that an old time Southern Arizona family. And I think you have a story to tell about one of the Aros kids, Carlos.
Well, I'm a little confused. One of my classmates was named Marguerite Aros.
Right, there's a Marguerite Aros here.
And we called her Mog, M-O-G.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a very vivacious, enthusiastic young high school girl. I didn't know her before high school. But I was always told that Mog was related somehow to the Hawke.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the validity of that, but that's what I was always understood.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, how Carlos and Mog were related, I have no idea. Whether they were cousins, whether they were siblings, I don't know.
All right. Well,
But anyway, World War II came.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos went into the service like many young boys that age, as did your father. And Babe, your father is on a Jeep. I don't know where he was going, but he went through a bombed out bridge in the Jeep, and they got stuck. And as I understand the story, someone pounded on the top of his Jeep, and lo and behold, here's Carlos Aros. Hey, babe! And they were so happy to see each other. So I don't know whether, I think Dad and Carlos got off their vehicles and had a time of talking, or I don't know how long they saw each other, but anyway, they were so happy to see each other. Old Tucson kids.
Yeah, in the middle of Italy in a war.
In the middle of Italy in a bombed out bridge. How many times would that happen?
But were you yourself closer to Marguerite than you were to Carlos?
I didn't know Carlos.
Oh, okay.
Your dad did. I didn't.
Okay.
I don't recall him at all.
But Marguerite, you knew.
Oh yes, oh yes.
What do you remember about her?
Oh, she was very bouncy and enthusiastic, and everybody liked her. And she and her husband came to our 25th reunion, and it was good to see her. I was not one of her close buddies, but I was a friend of hers.
Now, did she marry an Anglo, do you know? Or
No,
not?
she married a Mexican.
Fellow? Okay.
I don't remember what her married name was.
Okay. Now let's move on to one of the big founding families of Tucson, the Ochoas.
The Ochoas, yeah.
Estefan Ochoa was one of the early founders of town. He was in the freight business primarily before the railroad. Wife was named Altagracia, and you knew some of the Ochoas. Talk about the Ochoas you knew.
Well, really, I did not know the Ochoas until I got into high school. And Thelma Ochoa was a Spanish teacher in high school, and I had her for Spanish 2 years, and I just loved her. She was a very lovely, serious Spanish teacher, and I came to know her and know about her family much better as a young adult or a college student, really. My cousin Clyde, the second son of my aunt and uncle who raised me, lived here. He was a surgeon and had his practice here. And he married a girl from back east while he was in medical school. And she had a sister, Betty, and a sister, Margie, and a brother, Bob.
What was their last name?
Ellis.
Ellis. Okay.
Ellis. Marge Ellis. And so off and on, after she and my cousin were married, and I was in college at that time, her sisters would come out and visit her, and Bob came out, her brother, and settled in Tucson eventually. But the sister Betty started dating Steve Ochoa.
Okay.
Steve was Thelma's brother.
So Steve, would he have been, the son or the grandson of the paterfamilias, Esteban Ochoa from?
Steve was the son of Gertrude and McLeary, and I don't know what her husband's name was.
Okay. Well, Gertrude McLeary was the widowed daughter-in-law of the deceased Esteban Ochoa.
Yeah, well.
So he would have been the grandson of the.
Yeah, he would have been the grandson
of the original.
But
Esteban.
Steve was in the same class, or approximately the same class, all through school, high school, college, as Clyde, my cousin, who married Margie Ellis. And they were real good friends all their lives, their complete lives. And Steve became quite an entrepreneur in Tucson as an adult, and quite a wealthy man. He donated quite a lot of money to the university, to, I don't know, medical, I don't remember what part. But he was an out and about doer. He was involved in everything. And Steve had a great personality. You couldn't help but love him, but he had his nose in everything. And he and Clyde were very good friends. Well, when Betty came out to visit Clyde's wife, Marge, she started dating Steve. He was a bachelor and had never married. And they fell in love, and they got married, and Betty settled here with him, and they have a family of 3 or 4 boys, and they're the cousins of Mike and Pat and Tim and Mimi. And I think most of them settled here. But that's how I knew the Ochoas.
So we have a family connection with the Ochoas. And so what was Steve, very personable, nice guy?
Oh, yes.
Everybody's friend?
Oh, yes, everybody's friend.
Yeah.
Everybody knew Steve Ochoa, and everybody wanted to be seen with Steve Ochoa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So sounds like the apple didn't fall far from the tree.
No. And he was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy.
And
They settled with their family, had their children right across the street from St. Peter and Paul School on Camel Avenue.
Oh, okay.
And Uncle, your dad just loved Betty Ochoa.
Mm.
He thought she was the greatest gal. She had a matching personality
With her brother?
with Steve.
Uh-huh.
Matching. They both were very vivacious people and loved being involved. They loved people.
Mm-hmm. Now, was Betty married?
What?
Was Betty married? Do you remember? Betty Ochoa, was she married?
Was she married?
Was she married? Did she have a husband?
Steve.
No, Steve and Betty were brother and sister.
No.
Oh, I'm talking about Thelma. I'm sorry. I'm talking about Thelma Ochoa.
Thelma and Steve were and Thelma didn't seem to have the vivacious personality that Steve did.
Uh-huh.
But one of our widowers on the faculty at Tucson High, Doc Van Horn, who was on the in the sports department.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was in the sports department, and he had at least one son that was in high school ahead of. I think he was in Uncle George's class. Anyway, they fell in love.
Oh, with Thelma.
Thelma.
Oh.
Thelma and Doc Van Horn.
Oh.
And so later in their lives, they married.
Okay. And do you think, was that the first marriage for Thelma, do you think?
I honestly don't know, but I think it was.
Okay.
She went by Ochoa.
Uh-huh. Okay. Very interesting.
But Doc had been married before and widowed.
Uh-huh.
And had one or two sons, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they fell in love and got married after I was in high school.
Uh-huh. Okay. But you remember Thelma as being very nice and very, very good teacher and
very lovely woman, very proper,
mm-hmm.
very proper, but not in a very gentle way.
Uh-huh.
And she dressed rather proper.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't dress in high heels and short skirts or anything. She was a very proper Spanish woman. Wait a minute. My throat gets dry.
You want to stop?
No, Thelma had coal black hair, and always pulled it back in a very severe way. So she was a very proper Spanish, any woman, not just Spanish. She was very proper.
Old world.
Old world.
Yeah.
But Doc fell in love with her.
Now, were you aware at that time of the Ochoa family and their role in Tucson historically? Was that, you had no concept of that?
No concept.
Okay, but you became aware of that later, I'm sure. Later?
I became aware of different ethnic groups that were so important in we had a Jewish group that were so important in the mercantiles. We had the Mexicans that also were in mercantile and in various ways involved in the city. And later in life I realized it, but not as a kid growing up.
So were Steve and Thelma the two Ochoas that you had interactions with that you remember?
Did they what?
Were they the two Ochoas that you had interactions with? Were there any other
No other Ochoas
that you had interactions with? Okay. So let's move on to the Carrillos. The Carrillo family was very big in Tucson. Leopoldo, the paterfamilias, arrived in Tucson around 1859. And by 1881, according to the local newspaper, he owned 70 of Tucson's 2,200 houses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he married a woman named Jesus Suarez. And their son, Art, had Carrillo Mortuary, I guess. I don't know if that rings
That
a
was
bell.
down by the telephone company.
Right.
Mhm.
Did you know Art
On
Carrillo?
Pennington, no.
But you knew Natalie Carrillo, right?
Yeah, Natalie was a friend of mine and all through school. A really neat girl. And again, a girl with a fabulous personality. She just sparkled. And she loved to sing.
Really?
She had a very high color to her voice. And once in a while went flat. But she was a doll. No reunion or no group of Tucson High School people ever get together with Natalie. But what she has to start leading them in not all hail Arizona, but the Badger song. And she'd say, "Everybody sing!" And she'd start waving her arms around and singing it away. That was a wonderful girl. She married Art Warner, another classmate.
An Anglo.
Well, an Anglo. And he was the son of Dr. Warner, who taught at the University of Arizona.
Okay.
And he became a medical doctor and was very, both of them were very, how do I want to put it? They wanted to help the needy and the poor all the time.
Okay, became very charitable.
Yes, and so he spent a lot of his medical practice, he and Nat, going down to Mexico and serving the poor people down in Mexico. And they had something like 5 or 8 kids and settled in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
And they were near Lady Bloom and her family. Natalie was a part of a group of girls, Linda Crawford, Natalie, Barbara Winstead, there were Mary Ruth Sherry. There was a group of girls that always did things together. And they tried to include me many times, and which was fun. Senior day, they wanted me to be part of their skit and everything that was going on. And I was really closer to Elaine Bloom than any of the others. I would spend the night at her house and that sort of thing. So Natalie was very much a part of that. She was a doll.
Now, I always remember people talking about Leo Carrillo in Tucson.
Was he the actor?
I don't know.
I don't either.
But does that name ring a bell to you, Leo Carrillo?
Only through acting, through the man that acted in the movies.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
No, Nat was the only Carrillo that I really knew.
Because there was a Bertha Carrillo.
No.
Okay.
I never met any of her family.
Just Natalie.
Just Natalie.
Okay. Because my guess is her dad was probably Art Carrillo, who ran the mortuary. But I don't know. There was also an Emilio Carrillo who had Cactus Cleaners. Remember Cactus Cleaners?
What's the name?
Cactus Cleaners. Does that ring a bell? Or son Loreto Carrillo.
No.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to the Romeros. Romero, another big family in Tucson.
I never knew anything other than T.D. Romero, which was Danny Romero, the high school teacher.
Right.
I didn't know any other Romero.
Yeah, they amongst the first wave of pioneers, Francisco Romero was born in 1822 in Tucson. He was apparently a 4th generation Tucsonense. His parents were Jose and Soledad.
How was T.D. Danny related?
I don't know. I just assume he's related. I can't say for sure, but you know, in a town this small, you know, in a town as small as Tucson back then, you know, I would assume these people are somehow related. So there was a Roy Romero in the class of 41, and Blanche and Lorraine Romero in classes of 40.
I didn't know them.
But so talk about T.D. Romero, or Danny as he was called. Talk about Danny Romero.
Danny was an icon at Tucson High. He taught accounting, or bookkeeping, we called it.
Mm-hmm.
It was called bookkeeping. And by the time I was in high school, I don't know how long he had been there. He was a short, wiry little guy. Had an accent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Danny had, it wasn't a strong accent, but he had an accent.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, but your dad was a year ahead of me in school.
Mm-hmm.
And your dad was in the political realm of school all the time, president of his class every year, just was involved in everything. And happy boy, just tootling along doing everything. And everybody seemed to like him. Nobody has everyone loving him, but I'm sure he almost did. But Babe Trook was president of the junior class and then became president of the student body. And that's when he began being very involved with Danny, because Danny Romero was the class sponsor and advisor, the senior class advisor. And he became so involved with the Hawke boys, all three of them, that he had dinner at Mom and Dad Hawke's house at least once or twice, I know of. And so Babe knew Danny real well. So by the time I became a senior and took bookkeeping, Babe and Danny knew each other real well, because Danny, being class advisor of the seniors, always picked out the outstanding seniors and pushed them into his fraternity. And Danny had been a Phi Gamma Delta in college and was a dyed-in-the-wool fraternity man.
Was that at the U of A?
At U of A.
So at the U of A, in the Greek system, they had Mexicans were joining fraternities. So
Well, he did. He did.
It really wasn't a problem. Okay.
And I assume he was a full-fledged freshman or sophomore pledge. Some people were taken in as a special kind of member. I really don't know Danny's situation, but he was a Purple Legionnaire, and he was the one who ran the alumni group of the Phi Gams. He ran things, and he kept them straight. In other words, you don't have a beer can in your room. If you do, you're fined. I mean, he saw those boys towed the line, and he wanted them to be the best on the campus.
So he acted as kind of a scout.
Oh, yeah.
For Phi Gamma Delta.
Yeah.
And so he'd scout out the best male students at Tucson
Exactly.
High and channel them.
Exactly. Now, they didn't all go Fiji, because some of them had allegiance through family and to others, but the three Hawke boys ended up being a Fiji. And so when Dad was in college, a year ahead of me, he had a free time during my bookkeeping class. He didn't have a class. And he'd always show up in the bookkeeping class, walk in the door, come over to the table where I'm working on my balance sheet, and sit down beside me during bookkeeping. Nobody ever said anything or thought it was strange. Danny never said anything. He just walked in and sat down with me. And because we had been going...
Yeah, everybody knew you were a couple.
Well, and I had Babe's Fiji pin, which I wore on my underslip because I wasn't allowed to wear it on my dress in high school. That was the high school rule. Anyway, Danny remained friends of ours. I have a sweet story to tell about Danny. When it appeared, I guess that's how he found out, in the paper that your sister died, the next morning, 2 of the teachers at Tucson High School walked across the street from the school. We lived across the street from the school, and came and sat down and visited with us. Coach Gridley was one of them, and Danny Romero. And I thought that was such a sweet thing for them to do. They came across and wanted to sit with us and talk to us. But Danny remained friends. He made the best salsa in the world.
Oh, he made salsa.
Oh, he was proud of his salsa. I mean, nobody made salsa like he did.
And how would you get it? Would you bring it to school? How did you get a hold of it?
I don't know. I just know that he had the reputation. I don't think I ever tasted it.
Oh, okay.
But he had a reputation of making the best salsa in the world.
Mm-hmm.
He was cute.
Was he married?
No.
He was a bachelor?
A bachelor.
Uh-huh.
Little, short bachelor. Very dapper.
Uh-huh. And did you know any of his family at all?
None.
Nothing about his family? Yeah.
None.
Interesting.
He lived alone.
Let's talk about another important family in Tucson. That would be the Hawkes.
They were very good friends way back in the late 1800s with the Francis family and the Hawke family.
Okay. Carlos came in the 1890s. He was born in Sonora in 1870. Partnered with Laredo Carrillo, I think one of the sons of Leopoldo, in 1896. He was a member of Federico Ronstadt's band that he put together. He had 4 daughters, Carlos Hawke did. Also Alex, his son.
Well, who were the daughters?
Who took over when Carlos died in 1932. I don't know the names of the daughters. They don't appear in your yearbooks.
Well, no, they wouldn't be my age.
No. So did you have any personal interaction with the Hawkes?
Dad did, but I didn't. And Dad knew them through Rotary.
But you said they were close to the...
Oh, very close to the Hawke family.
You're talking about Carlos himself.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, Carlos only came in the 1880s, so he would have been about the same age.
I don't know. I know in articles in the paper that were kept when the Hawke kids and the Sadie and George Hawke and Mom and her sibs were invited to dance parties or to other parties, there was often a Hawke, and they were good friends. One of the Hawke girls, I think I'm right about this, married a Henry Dalton. And they were very good friends with Mom and Dad in their early life. They played bridge together and went to parties together and all. Uncle George, that was his job before he graduated from college. All the way through college, he worked for Hawke selling suits, men's suits. And the Hawke, yeah, Dad and his family knew them real well.
And they were, Hawke was one of the high-class emporiums.
It was a very good store. In fact, before you 3 boys and I joined Dad in Africa, I knew I wouldn't be able to buy any clothes for a couple of years. And I needed a couple of nice dresses. So Mom and I went down to Hawke, and I always loved going on their mezzanine floor. I loved their store. And they had, I'd forgotten about them. Do you remember ever seeing, how do I describe them? When you paid for something, they had these lines up underneath the ceiling and little carriers.
Oh yeah, they send them receipts,
send
money back and forth to the
office.
to the cashier. Yeah.
To the office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had that. I thought that was always fascinating. But they had a really nice mezzanine floor, which had the ladies' dress department, and I bought several really pretty things there before to take to Africa with me. And Mom always loved shopping.
Now there was also a Steinfeld's, right?
Yeah, Albert Steinfeld.
Which was another similar department store, right?
It was on the same level as Hawke, with perhaps a titch higher.
Okay.
Thought of as a Levy's. No, that was Steinfeld's. I'm thinking of Levy's. Steinfeld's was too. Well, your grandfather worked for Steinfeld's, as did your great-grandfather.
Now, why did you go to Hawke versus Steinfeld's? Do you remember?
I think because Mom and Dad had a Hawke. They had a Hawke account, and I did too.
So it's probably the family connection, probably.
And a family connection. And I think I felt I could get something for less.
A little more value.
Yeah, with more value. They had good quality things. Very good quality.
Did you have a sense that people came up from Sonora to shop in Tucson? Did you have a sense of that?
Not until I was a little older. No, I really didn't notice. I did, Frank, to be very honest with you, your mother was not a big shopper. I always felt I didn't need a lot of clothes.
Okay. Now there was also a family called Laos.
Oh, they were very important in Tucson.
Fernando was born in 1869 in Hermosillo and arrived in Tucson in 1888. Owned a fashion barber shop. Was a businessman. And there were some Laoses who went to Tucson High. There was Roy Laos.
Oh, yes.
Class of 41. Talk about Roy.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know Roy personally, but I knew him as just really nice boy. But I have a story about him. Later in life, Dad and I became docents at the university and gave guided tours on certain days and all. And at the end of one year, while we were doing that, they chose us to give us an award at homecoming, and it was an annual thing that they did. They gave certain different awards at a ceremony, and one of the awards was the Bear Down Award, and that's what they wanted to give Dad and me for our work as docents, and we had gotten to know the people in the alumni office real well, and the same day and at the same ceremony that we got our Bear Down Award, Roy Laos got a very important award. I don't recall the name of it, but it was a very important one. And as they gave the awards, they'd always say what you had done and, talk about it. And he got his award just before ours. Well, by the time they finished talking about him, we wanted to sneak out. He just was a very prominent U of A alum and Tucson man. They owned drugstores over in South Tucson, I think it was, the Laos. But
do you remember him from high school?
I remember him, but I didn't know him I didn't know him.
There's another family named Leon. Francisco Solano was in Tucson in the early 1860s. And I think you knew a Ruth Leon?
Ruth Leon,
Talk about her.
A very shy, not very, but she was a shy young woman. Quiet. you knew her, but you didn't know her.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You always spoke.
Mm-hmm.
You always talked. But beyond that, no, you didn't know them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's the Brichta family. Brichta. Bernabé was the co-founder of Alianza, the big self-help Mexican society in 1894. And you said you knew Stanley Brichta.
Well, Stan was ahead of me in school, I think. And I've always been confused whether it was my good friend Mary Freeman who married him and they later divorced, or whether it was one of my sorority sisters. Well, Mary was too. Shalimar. But one of my friends married Stan, and it didn't last, and they divorced.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know Stan that personally, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I always thought they were a mixture, the Brichtas.
Mm-hmm. They could be. Let's see. Oh, well, we have the Corbetts, but they're not. We'll get to them.
You know the Corbetts, Jimmy.
Yeah, we'll get to them later. Did you know anybody from the Elias family?
Well, we pronounced it Elias. I knew Dionisio, a boy.
Uh-huh.
He was a nice boy. I didn't know him beyond just speaking to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was in my class.
Mm-hmm. There was Bertha Elias.
No.
You know Bertha? Okay. Then there's a Felix family.
Oh, they were very prominent.
His name was Wenceslao Phoenix. He ran for office in 1892. So who from the Felix family did you know?
Mr. Felix and his wife, I don't recall their first names, he became vice president of Southern Arizona Bank,
Mm-hmm.
which was a major bank in Tucson at the time,
Mm-hmm.
that and the Valley Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether he eventually became president or not, but I know he was a vice president. And the first 6 months we were married, and we found out 3 months after we were married that I had just become pregnant and would have our baby the next June. We decided our little 2-seater 41 Ford wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
It was getting old and it was not big enough. And so I called my cousin Everett in Washington, D.C., who owned the Pontiac agency, and he said, yeah, I can get a car for you. And at that time, Frank, cars were very difficult to get.
Mm.
It was not that long after the war. The war was over in 45, and this was 47. And they were really difficult. A new car was difficult to get. But Everett said, yeah, if you get back here, I've got one I can sell you for $1,800. Brand new Pontiac 2-door sedan. And so Dad said, okay, we'd like to buy one. And he said, I can get a flight back there when I have Christmas leave. So in pilot school, he had a week off during Christmas. So he hopped a military flight back to Washington, D.C., and got to Everett's store. And Everett eventually came in that morning, and he said, there's your car, babe, and pointed to this two-tone gray, brand new 2-door sedan. And he said $1,800. And so he called. Now, how did that work out? He had called Mr. Felix at the Southern Arizona Bank, long distance, and he said, Mr. Felix, this is Babe Hawke. We want to buy a car, and we need to borrow $1,000 until we sell the car we have. And he said, I know I'll sell it within the month. So if I could borrow $1,000 from the bank, you'll get it back within the month. And over the phone, Mr. Felix said, fine, babe, we'll put it in your account. So that's how we got our first new car. And we sold our little two-door, two-seater, and sent him the money and got it paid within the month.
But this Mr. Felix, do you remember his first name?
No, but he had 3 children. Robert in Babe's class. Misha, Mary Louise, we called her Misha, well, they are a year apart. And then he had a younger son, Bobby.
So there were 2
No,
Bobs?
Billy.
Okay.
Billy.
But you knew Bob Felix.
Bob and Misha very well. Very well.
Okay.
Very well.
What were they like?
Oh, nice. Nice. They both married Anglos. Misha was a beautiful girl. Wow, what a beautiful girl. Bob was a good-looking man. He became a dentist, and Misha married Dave Parlett. Oh, she was mad in over him, like I was with your dad. And he died of a heart attack while they were on vacation in California many years later. Misha's hair turned white like mine very early. She was a beautiful girl. But Misha and Bob were very well-known students. They were very involved in. Misha was one of the major twirlers in the high school, and if she didn't look like a knockout in her little twirling costume, they were good-looking kids.
And what was Bob known for in the high school?
I don't recall. I guess he was in Uncle Tom's class. Yeah.
So he was a year ahead of Dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Misha was in Dad's class.
Okay.
Really respected, important family.
Here in Tucson, yeah. Okay. Of course, there was a Garcia family. Jesus was a Teamster and India fighter.
What?
Jesus Garcia was a Teamster and an Indian fighter, as quoted in 1933 in a newspaper article. I guess you knew a Nellie Garcia?
I knew a girl named Nellie Garcia. I can still see her face. We ran into each other as, I guess we were in our mid-30s, in the mall one day. Nice girl. I don't know much more about her. I didn't know her really well.
I'm just looking down this list here. Of course, Lopez. You knew a Maria Lopez?
Oh, she was such a nice girl. Very quiet, very sweet. That's about all I can say about her.
Really? Did she participate in any activities with you or anything like that? Okay. Annie Hughes.
Oh, Annie, I just loved Annie. What a bouncer she was.
Yeah.
Kind of a, how do I describe Annie Hughes? She was quite a sports person. Participated in a lot of sports. I wonder if she did in college. Annie was very light-skinned girl. Kind of, not fat, but kind of chubby.
Now, she was, I assume, related to Sam Hughes.
Yes.
That was very well known at the time. Yeah, so she probably would have been a granddaughter?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
But Sam Hughes married into a well-known Mexican family. He married Atancia Santa Cruz. And by he arrived in the 1850s and 60s, I believe for his health. And by the 1870s, he was the single biggest landowner in Tucson. Married Atancia Santa Cruz. And his brother-in-law was Hiram Stevens.
Who?
Hiram Stevens.
It doesn't ring a bell at all.
Another big landowner, but they married sisters. And there was a Thomas Hughes, who was the chair of the Pima County Hospital Committee in 1887, probably his son, and a Lewis Hughes, who was territorial governor and publisher of the Arizona Daily Star.
Oh.
So I wonder if one of them was Annie's father.
I have no idea.
So you have no idea her father?
I never met her parents.
Mm-hmm.
Never saw them.
And what was she like?
Oh, she was fun.
Yeah.
She was very enthusiastic. One of these gals that was just always upbeat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you weren't aware at all that she was at least a quarter Mexican? That wasn't,
No.
You weren't aware of that?
Well, I knew that there was some Mexican in her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I knew it. I think she had just a little tiny accent.
Really?
Just a little tiny, hardly discernible.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, I knew she was part Mexican.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't really run in the same circles?
No.
Uh-huh. Let's see. What shows we talked about? The Morenos. Did you know an Eleanor Moreno?
Moreno. Sorry, right off the cuff, I can't place any Morenos that I do.
Also, the Montijos
No.
were big. Actually, Manuel Montijo had a Tucson lumber company, formed a band with Lazaro Valencia. His son Manuel Jr. was classically trained violinist at the Northeast Conservatory of Music and taught at St. Joseph's.
No.
Co-founded the Tucson Symphony. And there was a Socorro Montijo who was in your class in 1940.
Mm-mm.
There was a daughter, Lola, who married into the Aros family. Okay. Payon.
P-E-L-R-O-N.
Yeah, Pedro Payon co-founded the Alianza in 1894. He founded an amateur theater group. So you knew a bunch of Payons, didn't you?
I knew Lydia Payon. Boy, I croak.
Fine.
Yeah, I went to grade school with Lydia Payon. I don't remember her in high school.
Oh, really? Okay. Did you remember anything about her?
No, she was a very active little girl.
Well, there were a number of Payons. There was Priscilla, there was a Hortense.
I knew a Hortensia. I don't know whether it was Payon or Peyron.
Well, there was a Peyron family, P-E-Y-R-O-N.
Yeah, that was Angelita and Dora.
Right. The Hortense was Payon, P-E-L-L-O-N.
Yeah, I don't remember what Hortensia was.
Okay. Well, we can move on to the P-E-Y-R-O-N's, Peyron.
Well, there were two. Angelita was the younger, and Dora was the older. I only knew them in school. I never knew much about them.
Okay. And then there were the Robeos.
What?
Robeo. Julia Robeo.
Julia Rebel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her father.
She was French.
Right. Her father was French, and he married Concepcion Redondo, who was from a very important Sonoran family. In fact, the Ronstadts married the Redondos.
Oh, really?
So the Robeos and the Ronstadts were kind of related.
I didn't know that.
To the Redondos, right? And of course, his daughter was Julia.
Well, Julia studied in France. She became a very excellent, outstanding pianist, and she studied, I don't know for how long, in France. And again, her father was French. She lived on 6th Avenue, I think it was, in a big home, old home. And as far as I know, she never married. She had some of her students occasionally at her home for little private recitals. I was in her home. And
was that the family home? Do you know?
yes, well, I don't know whether it had always been a family home. I don't know the history behind the home, but it's one of the great big old homes on 6th Avenue. And I loved that woman. She had the most fetching little smile when she knew you were putting her on about practicing. She'd look at you and she'd, "That's great sight reading, Avonelle." And then I'd feel so embarrassed. And one time Irene's daughter and I were in the room next to her studio, late in the afternoon. It must have been about 4:30 in the afternoon, when the college was kind of quiet. And before the band practiced. And Irene and I went into this practice room that was right next to Julia's studio. And we started playing duets of the big band music.
And Irene was good?
No, she wasn't very good, but she was good enough to have fun.
Keep up.
Good enough to have fun. Irene was a fabulous musician. Very good musician. I always considered her a better musician than I was. But she was lousy with impromptu.
Well, so what was her instrument?
She really didn't have one. She didn't have one. And in music ed, you took a semester of all of them. So, but she was smart and she was very musical as a person. And a great music teacher in the public schools later, before she married. And we were pounding out the Shrine of St. Cecilia and all this big band music, the two of us on two pianos. You can imagine the noise we were
there were two pianos going.
Yeah, it was a two piano practice room.
Okay.
It was a two piano practice room. And all of a sudden, the door just cracks open. Not wide, but just cracks open. And there's Julia's little face looking through it. She says, "Girls, could you hold it down? I have a student I'm giving a lesson to." "Yes, ma'am." I love Julia.
Did she perform herself?
Well, not really while I was there. She did give me a piece that was a two piano piece and played it with me in a recital by, what was the name of that? It was by Morton Gould. It was fun to play. And we played that together in a recital. But,
was she good?
oh, she was wonderful.
She as good as you?
Oh, for heaven's sake. What a silly question. She towered over me. One student recital I'll never forget. I can almost remember the name of it, but I can't come up with it right now. And I have to confess, and I shouldn't tell anybody, but I was a procrastinator with practicing in college. I just had too much fun. And of course you had to play everything by memory in the recitals. And so I memorized my solo, and I went in to play it at the recital. And Mom was in the audience. Mom used to come when she knew I was playing. And we always wore long dresses. It was very, very nice. And I sit down and I'm playing through this song. all by memory. I come to the top of the last page, and I went totally blank because I had just memorized it that week. I had procrastinated, and I went totally blank, so I just did an arpeggio in the tonic key that it was in and walked off the stage. Bowed and walked off the
I'm
stage.
sure there was a lot of applause.
And I know all of the faculty knew I goofed it up, but of course the kids didn't. And I came out in the hallway from the.
By this time, are you cringing?
Oh,
You know,
of
kind
course.
of, oh my God, what's going to happen now?
Of course. And Julia was always out in the hall to pat her on the back when you came up. She said, "And what happened to you?" I said, "I just went blank, Miss Rubel."
And what did she say?
Nothing. Nothing. What could she say?
But just to be able to throw that arpeggio in to end it was pretty cool, though.
Well, I knew it had to be in the key it was written in, so I just went to walked off the stage.
That's funny. Now, she was a generation above you. How much older than you would you say she was?
Oh, gee. Never thought about it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
She was a very heavy woman.
Mm.
Oh. She was probably, would she have been my mother's age? I don't know, probably the next generation.
Yeah. I mean,
She was head of the department,
okay. The department of what?
the piano
The
department.
piano department. Okay.
We had a Madam Altman, who was another teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and a Robert O'Connor, who always played the piano with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. Irene and I went in one time, and we were just fascinated. We were watching him. He was playing. Nobody else was in the studio. And we were standing there watching him, watching that cigarette get closer to his lips as it burned.
His own little metronome.
Yeah, right.
Now, another very important family in Tucson was the Soto family.
The Soto?
Ramon came in the 1870s. He's the grandson of the captain of the Presidio named Antonio Coma Duran.
Oh.
Yeah, Ramon was a rancher, ran a dairy farm for Francisco Carrillo, married Carrillo's daughter Maria, related to Carmen, okay. So there was, I think you knew an Eleanor Soto?
Oh, yes, she was a wonderful girl. She was a very fair girl.
Mm-hmm.
She told me when we were both married adults, I would see her when we planned reunions,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "You know, my brother and Babe were very good friends," and I didn't even know her brother, but Eleanor was a great gal.
Would that have been an Ernest Soto? Ernie Soto? Or
Uh,
he was actually younger, yeah. So you two were good friends?
yes.
What would
Eleanor.
you do together?
No, nothing, but we were good friends.
Just hang out, talk?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
nice girl.
Now again, were you aware at the time that she was from a very prominent
Oh no, I never knew that about
founding
it.
family of
I didn't
Tucson?
know that about any of them.
So none of that was just, no, not even the Annie Hughes? You weren't aware?
No,
Okay, interesting.
we were just kids growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Eleanor and I were in the marching squad and the twirling group together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another important family were the Tullys.
The what?
The Tully family.
Well, I don't remember them in high school.
Okay, but did you know an Alice Tully?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, Carlos Tully was an educator journalist. He founded the first Spanish newspaper, Los Dos Republicas, in 1877. Born in 1853 to Charles Hoppen and Antonio de la O of Santa Fe. orphaned at 11 years of age and adopted by Pinckney Randolph Tully, his father's friend. And he had 15 children.
Wow.
Retired in 1914. And there's actually a Tully Road in Tucson.
Told to tell you what?
Tully Road.
Oh, really?
So he was, I think, very involved in journalism and education. And so you knew an Alice Tully. Who was Alice Tully?
She was just one of the Tully kids.
So there's a bunch of Tully kids that you were aware of?
It seemed like so.
Well, he had 15 children, so.
And it wasn't until I was an older adult, much older, and Dad was working for Sears, that I knew one of the Tullys that was our age. And he was very fair, had blue eyes, and very fair. But I don't know how we knew these people who were mixed were Mexican, with some of them that didn't look it.
So you're not referring to Alice, you're referring to another Tully.
Well, I didn't really realize Alice was part Mexican.
No, but I'm sorry, but you mentioned a male Tully.
Yeah, well, he was later in my life.
Okay, but Alice, who was Alice?
She was just one of the Tully girls.
In high school?
In high school.
Now, were you aware that she was part
No.
Latino?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you just ran around and she was just part of the group?
No, she wasn't part of any of the groups I was in.
Just aware of her?
Just aware of her.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about now the Tanglas.
Oh,
The Tangla.
they had the most beautiful daughters. Oh, Edith was the oldest one that was in Uncle George's class. And then there was Dorothy, always spelled it with an E on the end instead of a Y. And she was in Uncle Tom's class. And then there was Mary Jane, who was in my class. Mary Jane died as a very young adult. I don't know whatever or what, but she didn't live too long. Dorothy, I have not heard whether she's gone or not. Dorothy married a Fitzgerald. I never met him, and had 12 kids. She was in Dad's class, or Uncle Tom's class. Uncle Tom's, I think. They were good-looking girls. Pretty girls. They lived not too far from me, on 4th Street, and not too far from Ross Scrooge.
Right.
And we were related to June Robles.
Right, well, that's what I was going to get to. So did you know that Dorothy Tangla well? Did you hang out together, or?
We didn't hang out together, but I knew her well, and as an adult, she was part of the luncheon that we'd have maybe once a year with some of the high school alums.
And I think she was a cousin of June Robles.
She was a what?
A cousin.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think her mother was probably a Robles.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so she was also half Mexican.
Right.
But
But she sure didn't look it.
Okay. And of course, who was June Robles?
Who was who?
June Robles.
I don't know, I never knew them.
But you know who she was.
Oh yeah, she was a little girl who was kidnapped.
Right.
She was on her way to the Caneva house.
Right, she's on her way,
after school.
Which she did every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was her cousin.
Right.
Right, and then she got snatched.
Yeah.
On her way.
Right.
Now that was, I think you were around 10 years old at the time when that happened.
Probably, but I wasn't aware of it.
And I think she was roughly your age. She's maybe a year or two older.
Who, June?
Yeah.
I don't know, I never knew her.
I think she was in the 6th grade, which would have made her 12 in 1934, and you were 10. So maybe just a little bit older.
I never knew her.
But you were, at the time, you were never even aware that this had happened?
Uh-uh.
That she had been kidnapped and the FBI came in, the whole bit?
No.
And she was later found, supposedly, in a box in the desert?
And with an open talk to it.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a strange thing.
Yeah, very strange. There's a whole book written about it. Very interesting book.
I don't know whether I didn't know about it because I just didn't pay any attention, or maybe my mother didn't want to scare me.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
You don't remember a time when you were around 10 years old where your mother maybe got real nervous about you were walking around or talking?
My mother was nervous my whole 13 years.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Was she very protective?
Oh.
Well, that's interesting.
Overprotective.
Interesting.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. She would follow me with her eyes through the kitchen window as I walked to school to be sure I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
She would, oh yeah, she was very protective of me.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Pretty much went with you everywhere?
What?
Pretty much went with you everywhere?
Oh yes.
Uh-huh.
Oh yes.
Uh-huh.
She watched over me like a hawk.
Were you aware of any anti-Mexican or anti-Chinese or anything sentiment in Tucson?
I didn't even know what that was.
Were your parents ever disparaging of? Did they talk about the Mexicans?
Well, my father died when I was 4.
Wow, so you wouldn't know.
So that eliminates that.
Yeah.
No, my mother never did.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that.
Mm-hmm.
She never.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And at school, there was no tension that you were aware of between the Latinos and the. Of course, half the kids were half and half. Sounds like themselves. You know, they were interdating and that sort of thing. Yeah.
But it's funny, they didn't seem to interdate.
A lot of them ended up marrying each other, but I guess that was later, obviously.
I had one little boyfriend in junior high school.
Who was a Mexican kid?
No, he was a redheaded, like your dad.
Oh, we talked about him before, yeah.
Yeah, like your dad, the redhead.
Yeah. But again, you weren't aware of any tension or anything?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
Now, your dad talked about getting in fights with Mexican kids.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Uh-huh.
The boys seemed to all the time.
But that didn't seem to be racially motivated.
No, it wasn't.
It was just kind of family against family.
Right, exactly.
You know, we'd get the two of us to get into it, then our brothers would come and support on either side, right? So, but it wasn't racially motivated.
The only time something like that happened to me personally was after I was married, and we had a black woman, contralto singer, who would come to Tucson and give a concert at the Methodist Church that I went to across from the university. I always remember her name, and now I can't. She was a delightful woman. But she sang a concert once a year at our church. And I was asked to rehearse with her. I didn't play for the concert, but I was in college, and I was asked to rehearse with her before the concert, which I did, and got to know her, and really liked her so much, and she seemed to like me. And
you accompanied her in the concert?
No,
just rehearsed her.
I just rehearsed her.
Okay.
J.D. Guthrie was the organist, a young man. Very fine organist, and a young man. He was going to play for her, but I couldn't rehearse with her. I mean, he couldn't rehearse with her. So the next year she came to give her concert, and I arrived at church and was in the narthex and saw her, and we both embraced. Oh, we were so happy to see each other.
You said you were in what?
The narthex. The
narthex.
You don't know what the narthex is?
No.
Narthex?
No.
That's the vestibule in front.
Okay. Building up my vocabulary. I like this. All right.
At 99.
Okay. So you embraced?
And we embraced, and we were so glad to see each other. Oh. The gossip, Frank, that went around from the people who saw us do that. And I bet they were all women. I can't tell you they were. The scandal that caused. Avonelle was embracing a black woman.
Really? So it was okay for her to come sing. That was okay.
But not for Avonelle to embrace her.
That's fascinating. And so what kind of gossip was it?
Oh.
That you were just were a girl who just didn't know.
I don't
wasn't
know.
raised right or what?
I don't know. It just came to my ears that I was being scandalized from hugging this black woman.
That's amazing. Mm. Now, back then there was the barrio.
I never heard that word growing up.
Okay, interesting. It's now called the Barrio Viejo, but it went all the way up and down Meyer Street, North and South Meyer Street.
Now, Meyer Street, as I grew up, was a bad street.
You didn't go to Meyer Street?
Something might happen to you.
Really? So you were warned not to go to Meyer, or was it just generally known?
You just didn't go.
So the good kids didn't go to Meyer Street. Why? What would happen in Meyer Street?
I don't know.
Hmm.
We were just told it was not a safe street.
Mm-hmm.
I
Interesting.
don't know.
Well, you were aware that it was a highly Latino area.
Well, I knew a lot of Mexicans lived there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you just refer to it as Meyer Street.
Yeah, Meyer Street.
Okay, because the Mexicans refer to it as La Calle, the street, because that's it was the street. Interesting.
No, I never knew the word barrio until I was an adult.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in your world, Meyer Street was not, even though a lot of the Mexicans lived there.
I didn't realize it was because it was Mexican. It just wasn't a safe place to go.
Huh. Nobody ever went down there for, obviously, interesting. So that was in your consciousness back then. Okay.
We lived a very simple life.
Mm-hmm. Now, Uncle Maynard, I recall he had some surface prejudices.
Oh, yes.
Talk about those.
Catholics. Oh.
Well, he was a Mason.
Oh, yes. When his grandsons came home with a mason jar filled with water, and he found them sprinkling their bed with holy water, I thought he was gonna, but he never said a word. I give him credit.
Because they married Catholic girls, or
what?
Because they married Catholic girls, or why?
Well, Clyde married a Catholic girl.
Uh-huh.
The middle son married a Catholic girl, and Clyde became a Catholic when he was in a MASH unit at Anzio Beachhead.
Mm-hmm.
He became a Catholic then through a priest in the service, a chaplain. And he told his folks, he said, I didn't become a Catholic because of Marge. She never insisted I become a Catholic. He said, I became a Catholic because that's what
He became a foxhole Catholic.
Yeah.
But so Uncle Maynard had the thing about Catholics. We could, there's a lot of research out there on the whole Catholicism versus Masonry problem.
He had a prejudice. It was terrible. But would you believe his best buddy at the Toros baseball games was Father Janitas.
Mm-hmm.
And they sit there and both have a beer together.
Right. So he didn't like Catholics. And of course, it's well known, the whole Catholic Masonry thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a thing against Latinos necessarily.
Oh, I don't think so. I never heard it.
So you never heard Uncle Maynard say anything bad about any ethnic group or anything?
No, not that I was aware of.
Oh, okay.
Or my aunt either.
Uh-huh.
Or my aunt either.
Uh-huh.
No, I never heard it in my home.
Okay.
Never.
Okay. Never heard it at school?
We just went about our business with our best girlfriends and activities, and it never was a thought in our mind.
Mm-hmm. Now at Tucson High, all the curriculum was in English, I assume.
What?
All the curriculum at Tucson High was in English.
Oh yes, all through school.
And do you recall any Spanish being spoken outside of class amongst the Mexican kids?
I don't remember anything about it.
Okay. Well, we're going to end this session here, and we're going to continue with another session in a couple of days, talk about some more of your friends, including some others that maybe weren't Latinos, but also were very interesting, like Wally Grauman and Jane Lowe and people like that. So anyway, love you. Get some rest.
Love you too.